Well, welcome to Let's Get Writing. I'm your host, Catherine Taylor, and I'm coming to you from Grand Falls, Windsor, Newfoundland, Canada. So be sure to let us know where you are watching this show. I'd love to hear that, and it'd be so fun to have people all over the world watching. Well, my guest this evening was born in Grand Falls, Windsor, which at that time was simply known as Grand Falls. And the town's main employer was the paper mill. And many, many people came here from places like England and all over North America. We actually weren't even a part of Canada at that time. We were a colony. And anyway, that's a whole history you can check into. It's very interesting. But my guest, eventually, having been born in Newfoundland, she eventually moved from Newfoundland and grew up in a large family in Quebec. And there she worked as a journalist in Montreal and eventually made her way to London, England, where she became a TV and film researcher before embarking on a career as an interior designer, lecturer, and writer. So many interesting things. I still haven't told you who she is. I'm going to draw it out a little more. But when this guest is not up on a ladder or at her computer, she can usually be found rummaging through flea markets or haggling in the Marrakesh souk. So she certainly loves the adventure side of life. But she also has a soft spot for Newfoundland, her birthplace, as well as Morocco. Her second novel, The English Wife, is described as a time-slip story set in World War II England and contemporary Newfoundland. And it was just published this month, which is June 2020. Her debut novel, The Lost Letter from Morocco, was published in 2019. So we know she's been a very busy woman, and she's currently working on her third book. I would like you to meet my guest, and my guest is Adrlenne Chinn, and we're going to bring her right up there. Hi, Adrlenne. And
hello. Nice to see you, Catherine.
Nice to see you too. And you're coming to us all the way from Burgess.
Rainy England.
Sussex, England. It sounds wonderful, but I know, I'm glad to hear. I have heard that all the lushness and beauty and the greenery of England is a great deal because of the rain. I've heard that. Yeah. More temperate climate, but the rain.
Lots of rain. Good
Lots of rain. Well, you know the weather. Well, I'm not sure. You have some sense of the weather here in Newfoundland because you've been here quite a bit, and our weather can change a lot. And there are times when we can have lots of rain and wind. And I mean, we are the next island to you.
Yes, I know. Just to skip over the water.
It is. A few icebergs along the way and so on.
Yeah.
But anyway, I have to get over to your place sometime, and I think we'll have to do high tea or something like that.
Oh, for sure. Yes, go to Fortnum and Mason's. We'll do that.
Okay, it's a day.
That's the place to do it.
All right. Well, I'm sure you're well apprised on that, better than me. I'll leave it to you. Look,
I will. I'll sort it out.
Thank you. Well, I want to welcome you to Let's Get Writing. I've had the pleasure of reading both of your books. The first one was The Lost Letter from Morocco, and I've been to Morocco, and so much of what you described, I was like, oh, this is so neat. And now I've just finished your most recent book, The English Wife, which is partially set in Newfoundland. But
right, yeah.
Yeah, well, but the first thing I want to ask you is, like, you're crazy busy. I've seen that you've got books published in interior design and so on, but how do you find time for writing? How did you get into this passion?
Well, I've always wanted to be a writer, even when I was a child. My mom said that the very first word I said was book, and everything around me was book, like milk was book and everything was book. So I don't know, started early. I do remember pulling all the books off shelves. I was fascinated by books. But yeah, I always just really loved to read. I read a lot as a kid, and I've always read a lot. And I just was I always enjoyed expressing myself in writing. So, but life, so I did a bachelor's and a master's degree in English literature in Canada, and did some journalism work in Montreal, and then but when I came over to Britain, you know, life goes in different pathways, and I found myself working in television and kind of fell into that, which was quite fun. And then I decided to have something where I could run my own business and do my own thing. So that's when I trained as an interior designer, because I really like design as well. And but then about, when was it? 2010, I had a significant birthday in December. And I thought, you know what? I've always wanted to be a writer, and I haven't really applied myself to it for the last, you know, number of years, because I've been busy doing other things. So I thought, you know what, in January, I'm going to apply to take a writing course. It was over here, it's called the Faber Academy. It's part of Faber and Faber Publishers. And it's a really good writing academy. They do a course called Writing the Novel. And it's one night a week and every second Saturday for 6 months. And you're vetted to get on the course. You've got to send them writing samples and all of that. So I managed to get onto that course, and because I thought, I'm going to take this seriously now. You know, it's like now or never. And that's the course where I started writing The Lost Letter from Morocco. And it just got me going. And after that, you know, I was working full time, interior design for myself. And I just did a lot of writing on weekends and holidays. That's when I was writing. I can't write at night. I just can't. So it has to be during the day. So it was weekends and night. It took me 7 years to get The Lost Letter from Morocco published, because it, you know, a lot of
I think
rewrites and all
reassuring to hear, because I mean, I found the same thing with my writing journey. You hear about people who do it so fast. Some people just bang, bang, bang. And then others of us, when your energies get to be divided. And like you say, if you're running your own business and you were traveling, you've been over in Hong Kong and different.
Yeah, I travel a lot, or I did before all of this happened. But yes, I was traveling a lot.
Yeah. So I mean, each time that's a start and a stop and a start and a stop. So you know, but you got it done. You stayed at it.
I did get it. I mean, I wrote many drafts of it, because, you know, the whole exercise of writing that book was learning how to write a novel as well. You know, so it was, and you know, after a number of years, I started sending it out to agents and getting rejections, and then, you know, I took more courses and sent it out, got more polite rejections. I got involved with a writing mentor for a year and did a total rewrite with him, which was great. But still wasn't quite getting there. So, you know, life is a funny thing. One of the women that I met on the Faber course in 2011, she had managed to get a couple of crime novels published. And I met up with her and a couple of other people from the course, and we had a bit of a moan session over some wine about, you know, why some people weren't getting published and all that. And she'd always really liked my writing, and she said, look, just send it to my editor. Just skip the agents, just send it to my editor at Avon, and just say that and I will tell her that to expect it and that she should read it. So that's what I did. I sent it to Avon UK without an agent in February, and then that was February 2018, was it? Yes. And didn't hear anything for 3 months. I thought, oh, here we go. You know, not going to hear anything. And then it was a holiday weekend, and it was Friday. I'd been teaching interior design in London. I was at the train station on the way coming back to Sussex, standing on the platform, and something pings into my phone. And, you know, on your phone, you can only read a little bit at a time. So it was from Avon UK. And I went, oh, okay, what's all this? So it's like, dear Adrlenne, we're very sorry it's taken so long to get back to you. As you can expect, we get many submissions. Okay, I go, oh, I've heard this one before. So we get many submissions, and, it took some time. We've all had a look at it. And what I'd like to say, I'm scrolling, and what I'd like to say is, we all love it, and we'd like to offer you a 2-book deal. And I'm going like, what? I was like, oh my God. I just couldn't believe it. After so many rejections, I mean, I had over 200, 300 rejections over the years, so you have to be pretty determined and just refuse to take no for an answer. But you have to keep getting better. That's the thing. You can't just keep sending the same old. You have to keep honing your craft. and just believing in yourself, and that's what I did. And then eventually I got it. But
Wow. And you hear about people that go through exactly what you're describing, and you wonder like, oh, when's it going to happen to me? And
oh yeah,
writers are out there, and you can really get down on yourself if you're getting
yeah.
rejections. If you take it personally, it's my writing, but it's not. It's still me because you put so much of yourself into your writing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You have to, it's tough, it's tough. And you hear of other people getting things quickly, and you think, what's wrong? And I mean, there was one whole year I didn't write at all in that process, where I just thought, I don't know what to do to fix it. I just kind of hit a wall. So I put it aside for almost a year, and then I came back to it again, fresher. And I just said, okay, and I'm going to give it another go and keep going. I'm going to keep going. I'm determined. I'd seen a cartoon in the New Yorker shortly before I got the offer. And it was one of these cartoons, just a one-screen cartoon, divided in one-screen cartoon. And there was this miner, chipping away at a cave. But he just turned around, you can see that he'd been chipping and chipping and chipping and chipping and chipping, and he just like turned around. And like a millimeter away was this huge gold treasure trove behind this little bit of stone that he hadn't chipped through. And that just really resonated with me. It's like, okay, I've been chipping and chipping and chipping. If I stop now, I won't, I'll never know. So I'm just going to keep chipping until something happens, So there you go.
Well, it's
Take
good.
Messages wherever they come,
Yeah, and then when it opens up, it gets so much easier. But I think the key thing here, what you said, is you kept honing your craft, and it's hard.
You have to hone the craft.
I look at things and I go, I'm kind of that nature that I go, I don't want to go back and look at it again and work it over again.
Yeah.
It takes a lot to do that after you've done what you think is, oh no, not again. I got to take that apart. And hey, writing is tough work. It's
Yeah.
But I'm glad to hear you got through that, and I'm glad to hear.
I did.
Hold up your books. Hold up your two books. You've got.
Yes, I've got. Okay, so this is the one that's just come out. Here we go. This
Here we
is the one
go.
That's just come out.
English wife. Yeah.
Wife. Yeah. And this is the Lost Letter from Morocco.
Lovely. There we go.
Okay. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. So, but then the second book was a totally different thing, because I had a 2-book contract. And the Lost Letter came out last March, and they wanted me to deliver this book by last July, middle of July. So I only really started writing it in January, and I had to deliver it by the middle of July. And I was working. And I'm going, it took me 7 years to write this one, and I've got to do this one in 7 months. So that's interesting. That was a whole different process.
You bet.
Nothing like a deadline. So that was a very different process. It focused the brain, I have to say. But I couldn't have written it so quickly if I hadn't gone through everything I went through writing the first book.
I hear you. And do you work from an outline? What's your style? Because there, people who say they're by the seat of the pants, and other ones say, it's so much easier with an outline and a plan. What's your style?
Yeah. Right. I'm not a pantser because you just kind of go in all sorts of, I find I go in all sorts of directions, and I've tried doing it. I mean, when I first wrote The Lost Letter, I was a pantser, but I've changed in my writing. Yeah. So what I do, it takes me about a week to work out an outline. And first I start with characters. For me, the story I have to visualize who I'm working with. So I work out who I want to have in the book. And what I do is I create a character folder on my computer, and I name all the characters. I put their ages, their birthdays, where they went to school, if they've been married or not, or, just all these kind of things, what color eyes they have, what hair, whatever, what they like eating. So I kind of create these little character paragraphs. I do that for every character, main and secondary character. And I drop in a photograph of like an actor or an actress next to it because it helps me visualize that person while I'm writing. So I do that. And then, so I do all of that, and then I do another segment where I put all the pictures together and the different relationships these people have with each other. So family relationships, love relationships, friend relationships, so I can see who's having relationships with whom. It's very visual. You know, for somebody who writes, I'm a big movie buff, so I find that I very much see the novels like a movie. A lot of people have commented that I have fairly short chapters, which is quite true, because I see my books in a kind of a filmatic way, in scenes, and I, yeah. So
well, I relate to what you're saying there, because I'm the same way, and I don't tend to write long, involved chapters either.
No, I do a lot of dialogue. And fairly
Me
short,
too.
yeah, fairly short chapters, fairly short scenes, moving on and all that. So I do that, and then I'll spend some time working out a chapter outline, and I just write a couple of sentences, 2 or 3 sentences for each chapter. And it takes me a while because I move things around and whatever. And when it's a time slip, I'll work out all the chapters for one time slip and all the chapters.
This is what I wanted to know, because in the book English Wife, you're moving between you know, World War II, and then briefly 9/11, and then you're into modern Newfoundland, and everything's connected. But I was like, okay, how did she write this?
Yeah, I kind of, it's like, I kind of call it knitting the novel. So I have my different threads, and so I worked out my 3 strands, time slip strands, and just because of the way things were, I was having to start in January. I was very lucky that a Canadian friend of mine has a flat in Marrakesh, and she was back in Canada, so for a few weeks, so she let me use her flat there for a week. So I worked out the outline there, which was very nice.
Very nice.
So I did that. Yeah, very nice. Appreciated that. So I was very focused, did it then. And then when I went back to England, I was working. So I was just having to write on weekends, and I wasn't working full time. I had taken 2 days a week to write, and then I was working 3 days a week. So I was writing 5 days a week. I was writing Saturdays and Sundays as well. And so from January until when did I come over? End of April, I wrote all the British stuff, all the World War II British stuff. I went up to Norwich and did some research there, research locations, all of that. So I wrote all of that then. I didn't start the Newfoundland stuff until I went to Canada. I went to Canada for 6 weeks last spring, a month in Newfoundland, stayed with relatives.
Actually, one of the people you stayed with, I grew up next door to practically, Glenn Edwards.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, Ben. Yeah, my cousin Glenn. Yeah.
I was like, come on, this world is way too small.
It's very small.
I saw his name. Yeah. Anyway, don't want to interrupt your story, but I have.
No, that's fine. So I stayed most of the time with my cousin Jennifer in St. John's, and they have a cottage in Eastport as well. So I was going back and forth with them. Her mother had been a war bride from England, married my uncle Gus, and so she was telling me a lot about war, you know, her mother's experience. So I thought that, you know, I think it's really interesting. There were quite a lot of British women who did marry Newfoundlanders or Canadians or Americans and come over and have these interesting, not always easy experiences, you know. And it was hard, you know. A lot of them never got back, never saw their families again, and all of that. So it was a big thing. So I thought, well, this is good. So I'd always, also coming from Grand Falls, I knew about the whole Gander story shortly after it happened through relatives and things. So I always thought, well, that's a really interesting story, and I really wanted to, you know, have part of the book in Newfoundland because I love Newfoundland. So I wanted to write Newfoundland. So I thought, well, let's get my British character from London on one of the planes to go to, that she's going to this interview in New York, and her plane gets diverted to Gander, And that's her opportunity to look up her estranged aunt, that her mother and her aunt don't speak to each other, who she knows is still living in Newfoundland in some remote outport. So that's the inciting incident. This is what throws them together. So that's what I did. And then, so I was writing and researching the month in Newfoundland, and then 2 weeks in Ontario and Quebec, and was writing every day there, when I was away. Got back to England on the 1st of July, and had 2 more weeks to finish the first draft. So I was just like 2 weeks of straight writing, and got the first draft in like on the 15th of July, just in time. So that's how that one. That one was very fast. Like a deadline. Very fast.
No. Yeah. And it's beautiful too, for those out there who are watching this who have not yet read your book. I mean, the way you blended the stories, and you mentioned the War Brides, because we've had some different pieces of theater here in the area about that. And when they were coming from places that I would consider fairly civilized compared to what Newfoundland was like at that time when they came over, like going to places where there were no indoor toilets, and parents weren't always thrilled to have these British women turn up. So it's not like today you could be connected. Like you literally were leaving your life behind. I thought you handled that so well in the book, and without being it wasn't overdone, but it really gave you kind of a timeline of a character, of what it went, and when she kind of stood. I loved it when she stood her ground. I got to tell you, she had my house too.
Said, no, I've had enough. I've been walked over enough. I've had enough. I'm putting my foot down. So, that was important for her to do that. I was
cheering for her when she did that. I thought, oh, wonderful. And it's such a wonderful story. And I just want to mention to people, and I think maybe because you are a designer and because you see so visually, I found some of your images, so how do we describe things that we see every time, but to describe it with fresh eyes? And I just want to read this. You said, ropes of bright orange buoys the size of bowling balls hang over peeling picket fences like necklaces. And I thought, I wish I wrote that. That was beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
And I like words. So
you do.
I like thinking of how to describe things in a different way, that paints a picture for somebody. Yeah, that surely did for me when I saw it. I could picture it so well, and I thought it's lovely that touch. And again, like when you're trying to do something like this, how do you keep it fresh? I mean, how many people have described that in Newfoundland, and then how do you take it? And you did it beautifully throughout the book. And so did you go with the same publisher with the second book? It was a 2-book deal. Yeah, it was a 2-book deal with the same publisher, with HarperCollins. So it's with HarperCollins in Canada, United States, and Britain. And it's just under different imprints of HarperCollins. The first book was with their Avon imprint, and the second book is with the new imprint they started called One More Chapter, which is digital first. First they get it out digitally, and then they support it with a paperback, which helps them turn things over more quickly in this environment. The publishing environment is changing quite a lot.
It's a very challenging time for authors because you're losing a lot of that face-to-face opportunity you can have in reading engagements. So, we're trying to do some fun things with this show, Let's Get Writing, and to bring authors out. And maybe I'll do something in future where we can have a few on and we'll do some readings.
That's a great idea. Yeah. I mean, I know Carolyn Parsons really well. You know Carolyn. And, she's fantastic. I met her last year when I was in Newfoundland. She interviewed me for her radio show in Lewisport, so that was really nice to meet another Newfoundland writer. So I enjoyed that.
We're doing our best to support the arts and support artists, and it's really nice to be able to do this. And I dearly love the people I meet through this show and the opportunity to find out a little more about their writing adventure. There's unfortunately, I find like with a show like this, we could talk for hours, but there's not that kind of time. But Your next project, you're getting that in line, and it's about, I'm trying to think the name. What's the name of it?
Well, it's a working title. It's more than likely going to change. But
Mm-hmm.
at the moment, it's called The Photographer's Daughters. But I suspect it will change. But it's potentially a series. We'll see. But it's potentially a 3-book series. Based around 3 sisters in Britain, in London, in World War One, and how they're 19. One's 19, and the other 2 are twins who are 18. And it starts in 1913. And we'll see how, in the course of the first book, how their lives changed so much by 1919. And they're all going off in very different directions. One is coming to Canada, in fact. One is in Italy, and one is in Egypt, of all places. And these daughters were influenced by my great aunts on my father's side. He had one who was an army nurse during World War One, and she did serve in Egypt and Gallipoli. So I thought, well, that's a really interesting story. And then the one who goes to Canada is based on my grandmother, who she and her husband, when the war was over, he wanted to have nothing more to do with Europe. He had been in the British infantry since 1914. He'd seen everything he needed to see. He'd had it with Europe, and he had a veterans. The veterans had offers to go to Commonwealth countries and get some free land as long as they developed it. So he was offered land in Alberta. So they went off to Alberta in 1919 with 1920. No, it was 1921. My father was 1 year old and his sister was 2 years old, and they never went back to Britain, and they went to Alberta. So one of the sisters is kind of based on that idea, and one is based. There's a story set in Capri, which I thought is an interesting place for the story. So that very Italian thing there, yeah. So,
well, you're going to be busy over the next while, and stay in touch with us on this and let us know how it's going. And if I can get this reading concept together, I'll be calling you, and we'll get you to read from the English wife. And again, remind people, check it out. We're going to have some notes underneath here for you to look at different things about Adrlenne. And I want to thank you so much for coming on.
You're very welcome, Catherine. Thanks for having me.
And a pleasure. And we'll stay in touch. Enjoy the summer. I hope the rain stops.
Thank you. You too. Yes, you too.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye for now.